David, you're an amazing flutist. We just talked about it, and you just picked up your flute and you played it.
Well,
Wow, we're going to have to give you another song towards the end of this session, but it is a pleasure to have you and Rodney, back again
I've
talking
probably
with
played
us.
that dozens of times at parties with guitar players back in the
Wow.
60s and
Well, you
70s.
had to play, you've played it before.
Well, I'm
Hmm.
jamming along like the guitar players would play and singing, and I'd be playing the flute along with.
Hmm. Actually, what happened, for those of you who are watching and listening, we were talking about the emergence of psychedelics in 2024, 25, everyday life. And we were wondering, I was telling them about the commissions that were being set up in the Caribbean to deal with cannabis. And I was wondering, why is it that so many young men and women had to be killed before we got to the point where we could talk about decriminalization and possibly legalization. Clearly, what they're talking about is the use of cannabis for medicine. And I was asking that, and I say, I wonder what is this? Did so many people have to die before we got to this point? And David said, the answer is blowing in the wind. And he gave us a beautiful rendition of this. I'd like to let you know that David and Rodney have been out doing great work. For the last 2 Fridays, we did meet. So I thought, as the person in charge of this event, oh, I'm joking. I'm asking the question, David, tell us a little. I mean, what happened? I spoke with you once. You told me, Stein, my voice is hoarse. I thought it was deep, but you had just been through lecturing. I mean, what was happening to you? What was going on?
Well, there were two events that I went to in those 2 weeks. One was a continuing education conference in Charleston called the Low Country Mental Health Conference, and there were famous people who are becoming famous, in psychology for their different theorizing and presenters up on stage in the Gilliard Auditorium where the Charleston Symphony plays, and there were over 1,000 people there I think in attendance. And I had one experience that was related to active imagination because the person who was conducting the session says you need to look, for in psychodynamics, this kind of therapy, you need to be able to look into the dark alley in your mind, and be unafraid. So I tried that. I closed my eyes and I went into a dark alley in my mind and I looked in the dark alley, and in the dark alley there was some kind of strange looking serpent like figure, some kind of reptile. I never really seen one like at first I thought it was a huge snake, but it wasn't really a snake, it was something else. But then as it came out of the alley, it started opening its wings and I realized it was a dragon, and I jumped onto the back of the dragon and it took me off, and I was flying. It was very exhilarating. The dragon was breathing fire down on the earth and scorching some fields, and it was flying, and I was there on top of it. It was a very exhilarating experience. And then the next experience I had, the next weekend I was teaching a course where I was the professor, and I did a demonstration to try to show the students there that they're students in psychology. I was trying to show them the concept of the collective unconscious. So I had them pair off, and they paired off into groups of two, and I had them. The idea was I was going to play the flute to distract their conscious mind and just have them listen to the flute and let their minds, their imagination go to wherever it took them, go to some
Mhm.
place where they wanted, anywhere in the world they'd go, but with the intention of going to a similar place to their partner. And it's pretty amazing how well it worked. Like two people went to the beach, two people went to the mountains, two people were dancing in a town square, and things like that, that, things that just the two of them were at and no one else in the class was at. So it's kind of amazing how our minds are connected. The imagination and the unconscious is a vast thing. It really includes, like in my first example, the dragon, is coming as some ancient, maybe were there really dragons at one time, or is it a myth or a fantasy, or where does it come from? But there it was in my mind. And then in the students' minds, they're seeing something that's maybe not from their own mind, like just like I didn't think of the dragon, they just let the music take them somewhere, but they happened to go to the exact same place as their partner was when I was encouraging them to make some kind of unconscious connection. So I think our unconscious mind, it could be vast. It's connected to all of humanity and all of human history. And I mean, the collective unconscious is something hard to describe, and maybe no one knows exactly what it really is, but it's a pretty amazing mystery.
Somebody might be thinking, oh, that's frightening. Is it?
Well, it wasn't to me. I mean, I followed the professor's instructions. He said not to be afraid. So this dragon, I mean, you might think a dragon is a wild beast and breathes fire. It could be very scary, but I just got on it and it was to me, it was very tame, like a horse. I mean, it just took me willingly, and I got up and was flying, and it was very exhilarating. I just enjoyed the ride. And of course, there could be other times when things can be scary. I've had dreams, for example, or seeing death or something that seems scary to me, where I am scared. But so I think, it could vary, maybe depending on your approach to it, maybe, we could decide that we're gonna, and I guess I knew that it was my imagination. So maybe the thing that I was immersed in the dream of being on the dragon, but yet at the same time, and it really was like a dream, but it was more like a daydream. So it was like a dream when you're asleep, where I felt like I was actually there, and I was actually on the dragon, and I was actually flying on the dragon. But yet there's a part of me that knew that I was imagining this, that I was awake, and that I wasn't totally asleep. I was kind of aware, and so maybe you can decide how scared you want to be. Maybe we have some control over realizing that it's not real. I'm not really there. It's in my imagination. So maybe if I was in
But you
real
didn't
life,
have to. You didn't have to say anything, chant anything, hum anything. Was it silence all the way? How does one, which raises the question, and we'll talk to Rod in a while, about this approach to the imagination, active imagination. Some traditions, people have to hum, people have to say something, people have to chant a thing every 15 seconds.
you know.
This active imagination thing, it seems like you simply have to immerse and calm yourself. I mean, is that really it?
Well, I remember there was a time when I was a mathematics major in college, and then I switched to psychology. But in between, I took a course in psychic healing with meditation and things, and I was always meditating. I heard stories about people see a vision of a guru or Jesus or something, like they see some spiritual figure. They're seeing these visions, right? And I saw nothing. When I closed my eyes, it was all black, right? But then I realized it was more subtle for me anyway. It was more subtle. As I meditated more, I realized, well, I can think about something, and in some sense, I'm seeing it. And so that's how I always
Mhm.
started instructing clients and students in any kind of imagination or visual imagery. Maybe it's different for all of us when we say see it, but maybe it's not really the same as seeing with your eyes. It's not the same as seeing it in the room with you. Imagination could be more subtle, and different people experience it differently. So what I've used is the phrase "think about." So I'll say "think about a tree," and then
Okay.
I'll say, "Oh, you're thinking about a tree," and then I'll ask them, "Well, what kind of tree are you thinking about?" And one person says, "Well, I'm thinking about a pine tree." Another person says, "I'm thinking about a maple tree." And so I ask the pine tree, "Well, what are the leaves look on the tree?" Well, they're not exactly leaves; they're needles, and what color are they? They're green. The maple tree, what color are yours? Well, there's in the fall they start to turn red and yellow, but they're not a needle. They shape more like a hand. They're a big broadleaf. So maybe they're just describing what they're thinking, quote unquote, thinking about. Now I don't know how they're thinking, but in some sense
Hmm.
they're in contact with an image of the tree. They're imagining some kind of tree, the way they're thinking about it. And so you can just be gentle with yourself and just think about it. And however you think about it, that's okay. Your imagination, what you imagine something, how you think
But
about it.
is it necessary to have an intention?
Well, you could just go into it with no intention, but probably there's some intention. There's some reason why people are doing it, right? They're curious. They want to explore. Maybe they think, that there's some promise from the teacher that they're going to gain something. Or Jung said this would help you to individuate your personality. Or this is, we're trying to say that people are going to be successful through active imagination. So people might maybe a lot of people have been using it for some reason, right? Or there's some intention or some purpose or some reason for doing it, even if it's just curiosity to see what's there.
That's interesting, David. Some might theorize that uh, elements of your ancient reptilian brain were activated, and so therefore, the dragon represented, that reptilian memory.
And maybe
Uh,
I'm finally evolving into some kind of animal who's smarter than people.
Interesting. Well, when you were playing the flute and for the tune, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. It made me think of wind chimes. I'm very partial to wind chimes, and I have several around the house. My next door neighbor has a one in their on their deck, and it's nice to sit out and listen to the wind and the wind chimes. And so, yes, the answer for us is blowing in the wind. Well, I certainly for these past couple of weeks have not saw ridden dragons or had such experiences as you, David. I've kind of taken the opportunity to kind of really regroup and kind of as best I can. The work I do as associate dean keeps me very busy with student and faculty issues. So yeah, haven't had that opportunity to get away to any workshops or conferences or anything, but certainly sounds like your past uh, experiences with your work and with students and uh, some of the conferences that you attended have been very beneficial. So
Yeah. Well, and of course, on the administrative side, our PsyD program has paused enrollments of new students because of some of the big, beautiful bill, the financial policies and things the government is putting out. So that's and it could be that if education isn't available to the people as it was in the past, then more, like what we're doing, we're here educating people, whoever will listen, and even all the Harvard classes and Yale classes are available for free online. So these degrees are just tickets to say that you have some kind of degree, that you're part of the club and you qualify for something, but in reality the education and the knowledge, that's free. The knowledge is free now, but it's a matter of who's going to teach it and who's going to listen to it.
well, that's interesting because we were just talking about uh, religion being the opiate of the people, and we're not to drift off our discussion into uh, politics, but we're definitely starting to see this Christian nationalist push towards religion, and Christianity being the dominant preferred religion, and so therefore, this brand of Christian nationalism being the opiate for the people, and education to a lesser degree, because if one is educated, then one begins to think critically and begins to compare apples and oranges and see the differences between the two and starts to question and
Well, I've been
our
thinking for the last 20 years that they keep on saying that we're teaching creativity and
Mhm.
critical thinking, but really what they're teaching is conformity and obedience.
Conformity. Yeah.
yes, exactly. I remember attending a lecture by this English scholar, and he was very critical of the English system, which the American education system is based off of. And one of the things he said is that all they were doing is teaching the kids to go over there, sit down, shut up, and do what you're told. And above all, don't ask any questions. So that stuck with me, and I think that's the, what we're seeing now is to basically, they want people to shut up, to conform, go along with whatever is being scripted and prescribed, and above all, don't question. Uh, so
So, Rodney, it seems that that looking into oneself, that immersion into the self, that is radical and not acceptable to this rising movement of government's activities.
definitely, because you're supposed to go with whatever's scripted, whatever's been prescribed, whatever the
Mhm.
slogan is, for this particular week. Of late it's been you know waste, fraud, and abuse. You know, illegal. Illegal aliens. All of those types of little catchphrases. If you notice, they're one or two or three words. Because they don't want people to think deeply or broadly or critically into what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're being told. So one interviewer uh, was told by this lady that yes, we want to be told what to think. Yes, please tell us what to think. We need your guidance. So unfortunately, I think what we see is many people are lost. Many people are relying on the government and
Mhm.
other various entities to tell them what to believe, what to think, uh, not having the whether it's the desire or the ability. One could debate that to
Or
be
having
able.
the data, like, suppose I'm trying to decide for myself, should I take a certain vaccine or not? I got to trust some research, some medical doctor who's familiar with the research, and I got to know what the research. I mean, I could try to figure it out, but it's so vast. I mean, you don't have the time to take care of every little problem you have by doing a vast amount of research. It's good to have somebody you trust, like your medical doctor. But where is your medical doctor
Mhm.
getting his or her information from? And
Right,
it's
right.
a we really do need, but I think what we need is a world where people really care about one another. Are gonna No one would think about giving the wrong information. No one would think about giving you medical advice that could kill you or something like that. That they all want to take care of you. They want you to be healthy. They want you to live and to be strong. But all those things are up for question now. It's a difficult.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
we always have to
Mhm.
look at who stands to benefit from the problem or the situation. It's always someone uh, who stands to to benefit, and unfortunately, in a capitalistic society, oftentimes
Mhm.
it's those who control the purse strings,
Mhm.
and uh, so they're the ones that kind of set up things to occur a certain way, introduce a particular problem, uh, and then come up with a solution. So
Mhm. Mhm. But this battle has been on long. The from what I understand, that whole struggle between what was considered empirical, which was basically statistical, quantitative, measurable, experimental, rational, objective, that kind of thing, that was coming up against experiences,
mm,
and which gave the majority of people a place in the scheme of things. Not everybody could own a lab. And those of us who had knowledge or acquired some experience, that wasn't considered. And over time, I mean, David, you remember Harvard. Harvard started to use, when Harvard began to use the case study as a means of teaching, but that was not always the case.
mm,
Um, Experiences of people were not recognized as valid forms of knowing or knowledge. And a lot of those things came about through reflection on oneself, immersing oneself into oneself. I remembered the Institute of Nordic Sciences, I think they're based in California, if I'm not mistaken. They,
I met the man who started, a guy named Edgar Mitchell. He
mm,
was one of the 12 men who walked on the moon, and I got to shake
right.
his
But
hand. I was doing, and I shook
Mitchell,
his hand, and he, I said, and wow, I touched somebody who walked on the moon. That was pretty amazing.
you're talking about Edgar Mitchell?
Yeah, he had a kind of a spiritual experience when he's up there in the in the
Mhm.
air looking up on the moon, looking down at the Earth, and he felt very
Sort of like,
protective. And
yes.
he wanted to do something with his life to protect the planet and the people, and
Mhm,
promote
mhm,
healing, planetary
mhm,
healing and human healing, and so
mhm.
he created that whole institute based on his desire to protect and care for the Earth because he thought it was so beautiful
Mm.
from out there.
Well, I've
Mhm.
heard of I've heard of the Noetic Science Institute. Of course,
Nordic
I,
sciences, yes.
I'm of course the radical uh, individual amongst the group who always questions uh,
Mhm,
conspiracy. I guess you one might say, and so
mhm,
there and of course again my apologies to the audience or anyone listening who might be slightly offended by our politics discussion, but it's all relevant, and how
mhm,
we can use active imagination to mitigate some of the effects of what we're seeing in our society. But I say that to say my point was is that there is this group of us that question whether we really visited the moon or whether that was really a simulation.
mhm,
Not to mention that if you go back and look at ancient texts, there is no mention of the moon. And so, what is the moon? When was the moon created? Who created the moon? And so we could get off into some very deep, interesting discussions around that.
Questions.
But this body called the moon has a definite effect on us. Whether
Mhm,
us Earthlings have made it to the moon is questionable, but
mhm,
I would like to think that we did. But then some would say those that have made it to the moon, we haven't been back because there are aliens there who have said, well, we don't know if we like you up here on this moon. So so we even have
mhm,
that theory. So the theory whether we
mhm,
even made it to the moon, and the theory that if
mhm,
we did make it to the moon, we weren't invited back because there were aliens up there who said, "I don't like
mhm.
humanoids here in our space." So very interesting
Mhm.
stuff.
I was
That
about to, yes, I was about to say that here, but how did Bob Marley sing it? They're sailing miles from reality, no care for you, no care for me. But
mm,
it's interesting that what the Nordic sciences people said, Rodney, was the lady who sent me the article, because there was a friend of mine from Tennessee who told me that when I told him, John, does an American find it difficult to look inside? And he said, growing up as a child in Tennessee and becoming an adult, and so he always knew when you spoke about something that you saw inside, you were considered freaky,
mm,
or it it is. And you I wasn't born here, so I don't know that, but you guys know. It was almost a scary thing to talk about looking on the inside. And the Nordic sciences people told me they spoke about parapsychological issues. They said, yes, this is true. Many pieces of research that explored immersion and looking on the inside did not get as much publication space. So I wondered if that looking inside is a very popular thing in this present society that tries to tell people how to think and how to behave and how to act and what to learn and what to teach.
Well, in the
mm,
field of
mm,
psychology, there's always been a divide between, the religious or spiritual people, and then the psychologists who are atheists and scientific, and really they take science as a religion in a sense because they're biased. A true scientist would be open to anything, right? So, like my experiment where I'm kind of showing there's some kind of collective unconscious or almost an ESP between people. if I tried to publish an article about that, they won't publish it. Probably they might laugh at it, or it would be considered it's not
Mm.
a legitimate topic of psychology. And there's just so much stuff so much research that hasn't been done to look at important ideas. Uh, and so our psychology is in a way been kind of narrow-minded. One thing I think about the field of psychology now is this almost become like a party line. The American Psychological Association controls the education, and they approve every program, and so every psychologist in the whole country has to have all the same courses, and all these courses use the same book, and they have to know psychopathology and DSM and treatment and testing. So it's become a very it's very consistent. It stays the way it was. It doesn't really try to explore new avenues that much. It doesn't use creativity or imagination that much. It just kind of keeps on going. Now there are creative people creating new therapies and doing new things that are interesting. And of course, what those usually are is taking something from somebody like Buddha, or somebody from thousands of years ago, and they rediscover it as mindfulness based stress reduction, or EBT or ACT, or all. There's lots of the newer therapies are using Buddhist principles, and so they're bringing back some of that spirituality.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah, a lot of there's even this work in psychedelic uh, therapies that are starting to be reintroduced. Ketamine therapies, to treat various neural divergent disorders, and so interesting stuff.
I
Because
think there's a kind of desperation, like PTSD. There's articles that say, well, this kind of therapy, that kind of therapy helps PTSD, and it's empirically supported now, but yet it's not helping enough because there's more and more desperation to always get more therapies. And I mean, we've been dealing with PTSD since the war in Vietnam, and I think the cause of PTSD is war for these people.
right,
Cure
yeah,
for the cure for PTSD is to not have any more war. But psychologists don't ever face that reality. They're always trying to blame the individual. We're patching up individuals, but our myth is that there's something wrong
well,
with this
yeah,
person
and
is sick. They're not sick. They're having a normal human reaction
sure,
to
sure, and no doubt, traumatic experiences, whether it be war or whether it be due to some type of horrific accident or what have you, is definitely a part of you know human experiences. And I think one of the biggest things that we don't address is for our men and women who are police officers. So some of them too have come back from war, and were former soldiers, but then they get out on the streets and dealing with shootings and killings and car accidents, and that uh, are traumatic experiences
sure.
that causes post-traumatic stress. And we don't treat that
But I guess what I'm saying is the whole field.
effectively.
It's like what you were talking about before about the government trying to tell people how to think. Every
Mm,
psychologist and every LPC and every MFT, all these licensed counselors and marriage and family therapists, they're all licensed by the state, and they're all what I call the medical legal business model. They all are
mm,
making diagnoses of people, and basically what they're saying is, you know, you have a mental disorder. It's like you have this illness that we're going to bill the insurance because you're ill. There's something wrong with
sure,
you, and
sure,
but don't worry, talk to us, take our pills. We're going to teach you how to cope. But we should be emphasizing more that there's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly normal. These are normal human reactions to the kind of trauma you've been through, and what you need is healing.
right,
And furthermore, you'll feel better if you join together with other people and try to minimize future trauma. Because if you just patch up victims like we're doing, I found from my experience over the last 50 years, for every victim you patch up, 10 more come. Because
sure,
we're in a society that creates victims. It's all about victimizing and exploiting.
exactly.
So, unless we
Good.
join together with other people and create a better world, we're not going to really cure this.
Relate, yes.
So I would beg the
Party
question.
line of psychology is kind of
That's it.
not exactly true. You could say it's a matter of emphasis. Like, well, maybe it's kind of true, but I mean, I just think we're not emphasizing enough that these are normal
Sure.
people who've been hurt by others. You know, we're not.
Sure. So I'd beg the question. I wonder if active imagination, can have any effect on traumatic post-traumatic
Mhm.
stress disorder. Maybe that might be a topic
For
for us
sure,
to
if it's done
to us explore.
if it's used under guidance compassionately and caring and really making. I think the people who do succeed with any kind of therapy with someone that has post-traumatic stress, they have to be a people person who can really connect with that person, have empathy and compassion and caring, and the person feels safe. I mean, a lot of times the big issue is feeling unsafe to even start talking about this stuff, and that's what some of these things like MDMA and some of the drugs that are being tested are effective because they're like a happy pill. The person gets so happy that they can finally talk about this stuff without fear, without.
Yes, David, just because what Rodney has suggested is great. We could probably do a little, do something on post-traumatic stress and active imagination. And if the literature is showing, or if we think, or through your experiences, gentlemen, that active imagination and imagination practices in general can help alleviate the stresses. Rodney, I just wanted you to tell us before David gives us his flute a bit about neurodivergence. I find it's a very interesting thing.
Well, it's a list of disorders ranging from autism spectrum disorders to attention deficit disorders, high functioning autism, and a few that I'm leaving off. But we previously called it Asperger's syndrome, and with the introduction of the latest version of the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, um, reintroduced the terminology of neurodivergence and categorized these disorders into a group of several to include those that affect individuals uh, with everything from communication and their social interactions, their whole perception of the world. And so a lot of interesting stuff that's out there. Myself and two other colleagues are working on an article related to what we're seeing in our students in clinical mental health counseling uh, who are dealing with neurodivergence, and so we're hopeful to be able to pull together some guidance around working with that particular population of students who want to be counselors, and so our program, who is uh, clinical mental health counseling, we're starting to see a whole group of students coming into the program who present with this diagnosis of neurodivergence, and uh, they present with some unique skills, and it's also some unique challenges. And so that's kind of what I'm.
Well, I'd like to
Mhm.
chime
And,
in with something I've been thinking about this for a long time, which is when I was in grad school, part of my dissertation involved creativity. And one of those elements of creativity is divergent thinking. And
mhm.
neurodivergent sounds a lot like that, right? It's these people can think differently. A lot
Yes,
are brilliant and they've come up
yes,
with fantastic.
yes,
They can hold a lot of information in their brain. So really, this is another example of the party line of psychiatry and psychology. We're going to call
Yes.
people ill. They've got an illness when in reality, these people could be a gift from God. They could be like
yes,
a part of
yes,
Yes,
human
yes,
evolution.
yes.
We need them to. Humanity's in such a pickle right now. We're facing possible extinction of ourselves because of burning up the planet. I mean, we need creative
Ah.
people to come up with new ideas
well,
to
that
solve the
that
problem.
and
So
that and
these people
artificial
can do something
intelligence.
great, not something sick.
Yeah, one would argue that we're replacing ourselves with artificial intelligence, but we are past the top of the
The
hour.
hour.
So
Yes.
so David, if you could
I could
close us
take us
out
out.
with a tune, that would be great.
Meanwhile, even with all this going on, it's still a wonderful world.
Beautiful,
Excellent, David.
beautiful,
Excellent. All
excellent.
right. Well, this is Dr. Rodney Penniman, Dr. David Cernoff, and Dr. Steinberg Henry wishing you an active imagination. Take care.
Okay.